something new a try. I wanted to try this new screencasting technique where you can see my face at the bottom of the screen. I don't love it. Just don't put me on YouTube, please, is all I ask. But I do love the fact that you can see my face, those of you who are at home. So first of all, I wanted to tell you that you rock, because you do. And also because today we're going to learn a little bit about the Stone Age. So if you've ever been interested in cavemen and what people believe about cavemen and what the earliest humans were like, then today will be a really interesting lesson for you. First, we need to make sure that we have taken notes on migration. Last week, we learned all about how humans traveled across the globe and how they traveled across the Bering Strait or Bering Land Bridge. It has two names. Did you notice that? Those of you who are at home, I don't know if I clarified. It's known as the Bering Strait or the Bering Land Bridge. But you learned all about it and you completed an experiment on it, and I really loved reading about those. But now we need to take some notes and make sure that we have the right information in our note packet on Google Drive. The easiest way to do this would be to copy and paste this one because there's a lot of fun shapes on it that I think it'd just be easier for you to copy and paste. Those that are in my classroom will scan this code and they'll have the notes for them. But those of you who are learning at home, you'll go to LMS and you'll click on the migration notes slide. You're going to make a copy of it. My screen's going to look different than yours because I'm not on an iPad, but basically you need to copy the slide. Once you've copied the slide, you can go into your notes on Google Drive and you can simply just paste them in. Then you can delete the empty one. So let's go through this real quickly. The evolutionist view of migration says that humans began in Africa and then spread across the planet in those 9 phases you learned about last week. How did they get from one continent to another, from Asia to North America? They crossed the Bering Land Bridge, which you also learned about last week. The creationist view is different, and this is what I believe, that people were created in the Middle East, in the Garden of Eden, and spread from the Tower of Babel after the flood. We did read a little bit of the Tower of Babel, and I know you learned about it in Bible class. So these arrows represent people starting in the Middle East near the Garden of Eden and then after the flood, and then spread out across the world in many different directions by God. And their languages were confused, they were given new languages, and they began their own cultures. Today we're going to take notes on the Stone Age, and we're going to start learning about the Stone Age. We will have a quiz on the Stone Age on Friday. So today's presentation is all about the Stone Age, and as we learn, you can pause this video and fill in your notes. Let's get started. This is the paragraph at the top of your notes, and I will read it for you. Evolutionists believe that humans evolved over 3 different periods of time, called the Stone Age. However, creationists believe that agriculture and cities did not take thousands of years to develop, that there was no Stone Age. They appeared in the first generations of people from the beginning of time. Now, do creationists dispute some of the tools and techniques that early people used to survive? No. I think early people also had to learn about fire. I think they also had to learn about how to hunt, how to gather food, especially after the fall and they're kicked out of the Garden of Eden. When death and sin is introduced, people are going to have to hunt for meat, and they're going to have to survive because now death is an option. So I do believe that early people still experienced some of the same experiences, but as far as the amount of time it took for people to develop these experiences, I think it was very short in a creationist view. So the evolutionists believe, like I said, it took thousands of years for people to get from just discovering fire to having a civilization. And the 3 eras of the Stone Age are the Paleolithic era, the Mesolithic era, and the Neolithic era. I'd like you to watch this short video on the Paleolithic era.
Smile and learn.
5 things you should know about the Paleolithic. The Paleolithic is the first period of prehistory. It's also the longest period of time in history. It begins with the appearance of human beings around 300,000 years ago in Africa. Paleolithic means old stone, and this explains the appearance of the first stone tools. During Paleolithic times, humans lived in tribes, small settlements of 20 or 30 people, dwelling huts or natural caves. They were nomads, meaning they didn't settle in the same place. They traveled from one area to another looking for a location to fish, hunt, or collect food. In other words, they were hunters and collectors. Among their favorite foods were wild berries, deer, bisons, or even mammoths. During Paleolithic times, people held rituals to worship nature and ask for food abundance. That's right, they prayed to the sun and the rain. Another interesting aspect of their culture is that they buried their dead performing funeral rituals. Wow, it sounds like the earliest evidence of spiritual beliefs. Fire was discovered in Paleolithic times. No, that's not what I meant. It seems that the lightning from a thunderstorm accidentally started the first fire. Later on, men learned to make fire in two different ways, rubbing a stick against a tree trunk or two stones together. Fire was very important because it kept the people in the tribe warm during the night or in the wintertime. Also, thanks to the discovery of fire, they could now cook their food and enjoy eating tastier things. Art in Paleolithic times began 35,000 years ago. I'm sure you'll probably be wondering, was there such thing as a primitive museum? Not really. The first cave paintings were made on the walls and ceilings of the caves they lived in. Cave art was meant to decorate. They liked living in beautiful homes. Their paintings represented hunting scenes, like the one you can see in this picture. Isn't it incredible that their art still remains to this day? To make the paints, they used soil, blood, and plants. They painted using their fingers or paintbrushes. The first stone tools were made during the Paleolithic times. These tools were key to surviving because they made hunting and fishing easier and more effective. This was great because they could get more food. To make these tools, they shaped stones using another stone. Some of the first primitive tools were knives or arrowheads. As they were progressing, they started using materials like bones or wood to make needles or even harpoons. These first men continued progressing, becoming more and more intelligent and improving their lifestyle. The practice of agriculture and cattle raising marked the end of the Paleolithic times and the beginning of Neolithic times. These are the 5 things you should know about the Paleolithic times. Did you like learning about them?
I'm back. It's kind of an awkward slide out. I didn't get all the way out of the video, but it's okay. So let's take a few notes on the Paleolithic era. So like I said, pause the video, fill in your notes. The Paleolithic era was between 2.5 million BC and 8,000 BC, evolutionists believe. Now remember, creationists, your notes say, only believe the earth was around what? Hope you said 6,000 because that is correct, 6,000 years old. Evolutionists believe millions and millions and millions of years. Now, during this era, people used sharp stones and bones for hunting. People lived in caves and used branches and leaves to make shelter. People during this time were hunter-gatherers. As you saw in the video, they hunted for their food. And they were also nomads, which you also saw in the video. And this is one of your vocabulary words as well, which means that people walked across the globe. They wandered around looking for food. That was their life. They didn't have one place, one city, or one town that they stayed in. They were wandering around looking for food wherever they could find it. And wherever they found the food, that's where they lived. People hunted different types of animals like deer, and scientists do believe that they have found traces of early animals like woolly mammoths. People also made cave paintings, and we'll learn more about cave paintings next week. The Mesolithic era is the Middle Stone Age. This was from 10,000 to 8,000 BC, and this is when people were able to sharpen their stones and make spears and arrows, like you saw in the video, and they built canoes to travel across lakes and rivers. Now, how come the video doesn't mention the Mesolithic era? Well, that's because a lot of people don't study it, but I think it's important to draw a distinction between the three. The Mesolithic era is in the middle. The Mesolithic era, people were still hunter gatherers, but they started to live in small communities, and this is what sets the Mesolithic era apart. People started to band together. They learned that, hey, if I hunt together with these people, then I can find more food. I have a better chance of surviving. So they started living together in communities. People hunted, fished, and gathered fruit and nuts to eat, and people started speaking to one another, started speaking languages. Now, we know, as the Bible says, and as creationists, myself personally, people were already speaking languages from the beginning of time. Adam and Eve were speaking to each other, to God, to the serpent. But this is the evolutionist theory. They think people started speaking around the Mesolithic era. Now watch this short video on the Neolithic era.
Smile and learn.
5 things you should know about Neolithic times. Prehistory is divided into 2 major stages, the Stone Age and the Age of Metals. The Neolithic period is the last stage of the Stone Age. Neolithic times began with the practice of agriculture and cattle raising. The word Neolithic means new stone, and this explains why the stone tools that appeared during this period were much more elaborate than Paleolithic tools. The beginning of Neolithic times is marked by the practice of agriculture and cattle raising. During this stage, humans started to domesticate animals like goats, sheep, and cows. These first farm animals were kept for their meat, milk, and skin. During Neolithic times, people started to cultivate the land to grow food, planting cereal like wheat or barley. For this reason, they stopped being nomads, and their lifestyle became sedentary. They didn't have to travel to look for food. They had everything they needed in their villages. Neolithic times are marked by the first settlements found near fertile land, where there was plenty of water. They needed water for their animals and crops. Cattle raising and cultivating the land improved their diet. That's why populations started to grow. Small villages were growing bigger and bigger, and this brought in new ways of social organization. Tribal chiefs were responsible for the safety of the village and the well-being of the people. The first man-made stone tools appeared in Paleolithic times, becoming more elaborate during Neolithic times. The main difference was that these tools were no longer made by striking 2 stones together. They were made by friction polishing, meaning they were sharper and more durable. It was now easier to hunt and cultivate the land more effectively. Neolithic people invented the plow and the sickle, which they used for plowing and harvesting their crops. One of the most important tools was the hand mill. It was used during the Neolithic times to grind grains. During this stage, a very important tool was invented, the wheel. That made agricultural tasks much easier. This invention is equally important in modern times as well, as it is impossible to imagine life without it. Don't you think so? Other significant inventions took place as well, like the loom, which Neolithic people used for weaving clothes and tapestry. Thanks to this invention, they also managed to make the first sails, which helped them to navigate the seas using the force of the wind. Neolithic people are also known for discovering pottery and making ceramics. The first megalithic structures appeared as well. They are thought to have been used as burial and worship sites. Villages were growing bigger and bigger, and people started using metal tools in their everyday tasks. The use of metal tools marks the end of the Neolithic period and the beginning of the Age of Metals, a new stage in prehistory. These are the 5 things you should know about this time period. Did you like learning about them?
I'm back. Let's take a few notes on the Neolithic era and then we'll be done for the day. So, the Neolithic era, the New Stone Age, 8,000 to 3,000 BC, according to evolutionists. People use agriculture and domestication of animals to survive. Two big vocabulary words. Agriculture is farming. Domestication is the act of bringing the animals in and taking care of them, that they are your animal, and making sure they survive so that they can benefit you and your family. People also make pottery and carvings during this time, and this is a picture of one of the oldest pots, clay pots that we have found. Also in the Neolithic era, people make fire on their own and they learn to control it on their own as well. People set up their own trading system and began bargaining with one another, kind of like an economy. People start sewing and making their own clothes according to evolutionists. Now we know as creationists, as children of God, that God makes Adam and Eve clothes the moment that they sin in the garden to cover them. People also in the Neolithic era, according to evolutionists, build structures like megaliths, like Stonehenge, which we'll also learn about next week. This is the end of the Stone Ages presentation. So make sure that you have all of your notes. And tomorrow we're going to answer some review questions on this presentation and on your notes. It was great to see you, and I hope that you have an awesome day.